How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing good.
Okay, you're almost at the end. I know that the movie comes out on Friday, and it's Wednesday. So how's the promotional tour been for you?
Been very exciting, but at the same time, I'm pretty nervous about the whole thing. I mean, as a first-time director, every single thing that I do is the first time. So this whole kind of idea of press and people talking about the movie and answering questions is just something that I've never had to do before. So it's been pretty exciting, while at the same time I'm nervous every day.
How was the New York junket? Was that weird for you?
Yes. No, definitely. I mean, from the moment, I got out of the car and drove into New York, I don't go to the city very often, so that in itself is a big rush, but then, to do your first real press junket, it's pretty crazy.
And so, for people who aren't familiar with the movie, although they're doing a really good job advertising it, could you give a little bit about what the film is about, and also how did the project come together for you?
I mean, basically, what the movie's about is two people, James and Kristen, who have been a couple that have known each other for a long time and have been together for a long time. And on the night that they go out to like a college friend's wedding, James proposes to Kristen with the idea that he's going to take her back for a romantic night in this home that his family's had for a long time that's really special to him. And then what ends up happening is she says no, and they're kind of stuck with, we're going to have to still go back to this place because he's already checked out of his hotel. And so they go back there, and that's kind of really where the movie picks up. And so it's about these people that have come back to this house and what ends up happening when some strangers knock on their door, and how it changes their night and their lives. And what would you do and kind of put the audience in that place of what would you do if people came in to attack. And for me, the movie was always kind of about trying to put an audience into the place of what kind of victims go through in situations like, we read a lot about people getting murdered in the streets or people getting attacked, and very often we know later by reading the newspaper accounts or watching the History Channel documentaries that we always know what the cause of who these people who the attackers were, but I was really fascinated in the idea that when you read about somebody killed on they didn't necessarily know what happened. So I wanted to be with the victims and be with these characters as they experience kind of blind terror without a rhyme or reason.
And I know that it was based on a true story, or am I wrong about that?
It was based on multiple things. I mean, when I was a kid, I went out to stay with my grandmother in a small town, and as I was leaving, I was around 11 or 12 years old. My dad gave me a book to read, and he gave me Helter Skelter, which was a very strange pick, and I had no idea what it was, but I kind of I read it over this week and a half, and got really interested in it, and what grabbed me about it wasn't Charles Manson and wasn't the mythology of the family. It was the idea that the book laid out in so many details. It drew me into those nights where these murders occurred, and I started to get fascinated with the idea that I'm reading a book that is telling me everything about what happened with these murders, but for the people that were in the house, they had no idea. So I kind of started that interest in the idea of looking at victims in these kind of cases, in these famous cases, and thinking what happened to them. And then as I continue to think about scary stories, I remembered another incident that was around that time where I had been in a house with my little sister that was very similar to the house and the strangers out in the middle of nowhere, and a group of people had gone and knocked on doors, and they were knocking on every door on the street with the idea that whoever didn't open the door, they would kick in the door and rob the place. And my little sister at 7 years old actually answered the door and saw these people and talked to them, and they asked for some fake name or something, and she didn't know who that person was, and so they went to the next house. And I remember thinking, even back then, like, God, if they had kicked in the door, what would we have done? And so those two things, were really kind of the beginning place for, I wanted to tell a story from the point of view of somebody's you read about in an obituary or something like that.
And how challenging, I mean, there's been many films that have been either thriller, horror, scary films. How hard is it as a director to figure out ways to shock the audience that they haven't seen?
I mean, I think that for me, not having directed before, like, I kind of stuck with one central idea, which was I didn't want to go fancy. I didn't want to go quick cuts. I didn't want to do things that pulled an audience out. Because the horror films that mean the most to me, the 70s kind of films, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Exorcist, even The Shining, there was a simplicity to it that always really attracted me. That they by taking time to learn the characters, by taking time to shooting it in a simple way, sometimes low budget way, it was bringing you in to the space. And so, for me, it wasn't so much that I needed to reinvent horror as much as look at the things that, would allow the audience to not be able to put up that fourth wall and not be able to say, wow, that was a really cool shot and the CGI was amazing and the camera floated through the wall. Instead, to say, oh my God, this could happen to me, and let the audience kind of do the rest.